The era of the empath's silent suffering is over. The time when they were taught that kindness must come with endurance, that to love means to save someone even as that person destroys you, has ended. We once believed that if we kept giving, kept understanding a little more, forgiving one more time, things would eventually change. But they didn't. The only thing that changed was us. From a soul that listened, we became a refuge for someone else's darkness. From a heart that cared, we turned into a mirror reflecting another's illusion of power. But there comes a moment when the empath awakens not in screams or rebellion, but in conscious silence. The silence of one who has seen the truth and no longer wishes to play in that theater. Carl Jung once said, "You cannot defeat darkness by hating it. You only conquer it by looking straight into it and realizing it no longer scares you." When the empath reaches that point, they are no longer manipulated by guilt or suffocated by the need for validation. They do not seek revenge on the narcissist. They simply withdraw their energy from the game, and that's when the illusion collapses. In this video, we'll explore 7 unmistakable signs that you have truly defeated the narcissist, not through battle, but through awareness, peace, and sacred detachment. Because the empath's true victory is never about making someone bow down, it's about reclaiming the power to define who you are. Sign 1. The narcissist withdraws in silence when you're no longer their emotional fuel. There was a time when their silence pierced your heart. A single seen message with no reply could send you spiraling into self-blame. What did I do wrong? Am I too sensitive? You became accustomed to chasing, to trying to fix an absence that spoke louder than words. And that's exactly where their power was born, from your reaction. A narcissist doesn't live on love. They live on your reactions, your confusion, your hurt, your attempts to prove yourself. All of it is fuel that reminds them they exist. To them, your attention is oxygen, your silence is suffocation. But one day, something inside you changes. Not because you've turned cold, but because you're tired. Tired of explaining, tired of carrying other people's emotions, tired of loving like you owe someone a debt. And then you stop. This time, when they go silent, you stay silent too. When they try to provoke you, you don't react. When they test the waters with vague messages, you just smile, calm and unshaken. Not because you're playing a strategy, but because you simply no longer have the energy to perform the old role. You've seen the game, and in that moment, everything reverses. Imagine a familiar room where they once bragged about their victories, voice loud, eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. Today, you walk in and say nothing. You don't force a laugh, don't smooth the tension, don't make yourself smaller. You simply are, present, peaceful, and suddenly, the air shifts like morning light slipping through the blinds, quietly revealing every crack, every speck of dust, every old smell. They feel exposed. They fidget, change topics, give awkward laughs, their eyes darting away. They might pretend to be busy, indifferent, or blame you. But inside, they're panicking because they can't read you anymore. You've become still, and stillness is what they fear most. For them, silence isn't peace. It's a mirror. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And the moment you stop reacting is the moment they're forced to face that soul, empty, isolated, afraid. So they retreat quietly. No announcement, no farewell. They'll vanish a day, a week, maybe longer. No texts, no explanations. They want you to panic, to reach out, to ask, to apologize, because that's how they know they still matter. But this time you don't. You let the silence tell its own story. And somewhere in that empty room, they feel it, the real disconnection. No more of your energy, your gaze, your reactions. Only themselves, alone with the void they used to cover with manipulation. That's why they withdraw. Not because they're at peace, but because your light now burns their shadow. You don't need to fight to win, you just stop playing. And in the game of power, non-participation is the final move. In that moment, you know you've transcended it, not because you destroyed them, but because you no longer need them to feel whole. You've walked out of the labyrinth they're still trying to rebuild with lies. And within that silence, a truth whispers soft but seismic. They never truly controlled you. They only fed on the way you reacted. And now, you don't react anymore. Sign 2. Their eyes turn cold, but they no longer scare you. After you withdraw your energy, the narcissist often goes silent for a while. But eventually they return not to reconnect, but to test whether the puppet still moves. That's when you see those familiar eyes again, the ones that once melted you, made you believe they really love me. But this time, something's changed. Their gaze has lost its power. You used to see pain in it, a flicker of vulnerability, a false plea for rescue that made you forget your boundaries. But now, awakened, you recognize it for what it is, not emotional depth, but the depth of emptiness. When they look at you now, you see it clearly that gaze doesn't hold love, it holds fear. Fear of losing control. The narcissist grows uneasy. They try their old tricks, the cold stare, the smirk, the patronizing tone. Once, these things made you shrink, fall silent, or self-blame, but now you don't. You no longer seek their approval. You no longer fear their judgment. You just stand there calm, grounded, looking back, not with hatred, but with truth. And in that instant, something inside them cracks. The person who once believed they could make you tremble with a glance now faces a version of you they cannot decipher, steady, sovereign, emotionally untouchable. Their eyes change no longer weapons, but mirrors, reflecting their own helplessness. You may see anger, confusion, even fear in those eyes. They are staring at someone they can no longer reach, and they don't know what to do with that. Once, their silence made you feel guilty. Their coldness made you overcompensate, doing everything to fix it. But now, when they look at you with that icy stare, you feel no fear, only clarity. You see a person clinging to a role in a play that has already ended. Carl Jung once wrote, "Nothing terrifies the master more than the slave realizing he is free." And indeed, in the moment you stop being controlled by that gaze, a profound freedom takes root inside you. From here, they might respond in 2 ways. By trying to guilt-trip you, or by pretending they don't care. But both come from the same source, fear of losing emotional dominance. And you finally understand, that look no longer defines your worth. Sign 3. They start imitating you, but only superficially. At first, it may confuse you. The person who once mocked you for being too sensitive now talks about compassion. The one who called you too serious now posts about healing, growth, and positive energy. The one who ridiculed you for reading, journaling, or meditating now proudly does the same. But when you step back and observe, you realize they haven't changed. They're imitating you, not to become better, but to regain control. When they can no longer make you fall, they try to become you, believing that by wearing your skin, they can reclaim the power they lost. A narcissist has no true self. They are a collage of borrowed identities, pieced together from the people they consume. When you leave, they lose their primary source of identity. And instead of facing that void, they do what they always do: steal energy that isn't theirs. Carl Jung said, "What we do not possess within ourselves, we seek to possess in others." They are the living embodiment of that truth. They'll start to talk like you, laugh like you, post like you, even dress like you. They might even tell others that they were the ones who taught you those things. It's absurd, but it's really their fear speaking. Because when they lost you, they lost the best version of themselves, the one they'd stolen through reflection. You'll see them showing off a new image, a changed person, deep, spiritually awakened. But look closer. The eyes are still empty, the tone still cold. Because they can mimic behavior, but they can't copy a soul. They can talk about love, but they can't feel it. They can preach freedom, yet still fear their own silence. They can pretend to be awakened, yet remain asleep, dreaming inside the costume they borrowed from you. And you, once the one who suffered, now stand in quiet observation, No need to prove, no need to rage. You simply see the truth. You are real, they are not. You build peace through confrontation. They try to reconstruct it through imitation. You live, they perform. The moment they start copying you is in fact their loudest confession. They're saying without words, I want to be you because I can't be myself. Sign 4, when they start losing control and try everything to pull you back into the spiral. After the imitations fail, after every attempt to play you falls flat, the narcissist begins to feel their worst fear. They've lost control. And when a narcissist loses control, they don't disappear, they erupt. At first, they return with manufactured softness. A simple text, I just want to talk for a minute. A harmless check-in. How have you been? Even something tender. I miss you. But behind those words isn't love, it's a test. They're probing to see whether the supply still reacts, whether you'll still hand over your energy. If you reply even with something curt, they know the game is still on. But if you remain silent, if you no longer fall into the trap of emotional reactivity, they start to unravel. From the role of the remorseful one, they shift to the victim, and then quickly to the attacker. One day they send a heartfelt apology. The next they post insinuations, casting you as the villain. They smear, distort, and retell the story as the betrayed one. The single goal, trigger a reaction. Because to them your reaction, anger, or pity is fuel. They don't need your love. They just need your attention. Your attention is oxygen to their dying ego. When you cut off that oxygen, they suffocate. Carl Jung once said, what you resist persists. They understand this instinctively, so they provoke you to drag you back into the emotional arena. They'll claim they're suffering, that no one understands them, that they can't sleep, that they're sick or depressed, and that only you can save them. But this isn't a true cry for help. It's the ego, terrified of collapse. Someone who truly wants to change can tolerate silence. A narcissist cannot. Silence forces them to face what they've always avoided themselves. So they rotate through tactics, attack, self-pity, even parading someone new, anything to make you react. But this time, you're different. You don't need to win, to prove, or to save face. You only need not to return. You've learned that your reaction is their reward, and silence is your boundary. They'll rage, then soften, then rage again, a relentless cycle of psychological collapse. And in that storm, you stay steady. Not because you're numb, but because you've chosen peace over drama. When they grasp that you're no longer participating, that you're no longer the audience in their play, that's when they truly crumble. You see it clearly. Their words lose weight, their eyes grow empty, their tone turns desperate. They cling to the past to keep a shred of power, but the past is now only an echo in an empty room. You realize you don't need revenge, proof, or to teach them a lesson. Your silence is the lesson. By refusing to react, you stop feeding their illusion. By holding your calm in the storm, you move to a level they cannot reach. And when they panic and try every trick to drag you back, you know you're no longer in the game. You don't have to end them because they're already ending themselves, unable to bear the truth that the power they once had existed only as long as you believed in it. Sign 5. When the world begins to see through their mask. Once you stop reacting, the narcissist loses the only energy that sustains their self-image. But their collapse doesn't stop there. When they can't control you, they start losing control elsewhere. And then the thing they fear most happens. Other people begin to see what you saw. The mask starts to crack. At first, it's small. A careless sentence that exposes a contradiction. An overreaction in a normal situation. A glance that no longer carries counterfeit confidence. Those who once admired them start to doubt. Those who once trusted them sense something off. And once the light of truth touches something, it spreads. The persona they spent years curating, the perfect friend, ideal partner, beloved colleague, begins to fracture. They try to patch it with words, smiles, and clever justifications, but the harder they try, the more it shows. The strain in the voice, the falseness in the eyes, excuses that no longer match reality, all of it helps others recognize the deception they previously missed. A narcissist lives by image. When the image tears, it feels like being skinned alive. They do not live authentically. They exist through the gaze of others. Lose that gaze, and they lose the ego. Carl Jung wrote, "The mask we wear before society is the persona, and when the persona collapses, the ego is forced to face the shadow it denied. In this phase, they'll do anything to save the illusion. They'll desperately replay the good person role, recruit new people to replace you, even pretend to change to win back trust. But time is no longer on their side. Once truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Every gesture is now examined in a new light, the light of awakening. Their words might sound right, but they no longer feel real. They can still smile, but the smile doesn't reach their eyes, and the very people who once adored them begin to step back just as you did. They'll blame you, insisting you exposed them or ruined their image. But you know the truth. You didn't do anything. It was truth itself that undid them. You simply stopped reacting enough for everything to reveal itself. Narcissists believe they can control the narrative, that if they speak cleverly, people will believe. But they forget truth doesn't need a defender. It only needs silence. And your silence is the strongest testimony. When the mask falls, they don't just lose you, they lose the stage, the audience, the role. And there they stand alone amid the wreckage of the image they worshipped. You, once their mirror, have stepped out of the play and now watch with the calm of someone who understands you never needed to unmask anyone, because truth always finds its way. Sign 6. When they become quietly obsessed with you, when the mask is gone and no one believes the image anymore, the narcissist enters the phase they dread most, being forgotten. They once believed they were the center, admired, remembered, irreplaceable. But when no one reacts, when people begin to avoid them, when you live peacefully without mentioning them, a vast emptiness opens inside. And in that emptiness, you become an obsession. They cannot tolerate the thought that they no longer have power over you. So they start watching you in silence, not out of love, but to confirm they still exist in your world. They'll check your page, see what you post, who you laugh with, how you're living. They can't stand seeing you well, but they can't bear your silence either. Everything you do becomes a stimulant for their starving ego. Jung said, "What we deny in ourselves returns from the outside as fate." You are the mirror they tried to shatter, now the image they cannot escape. They think of you more than ever, not from love, but because you represent what they can never become. Truth, peace, freedom. Deep down, they know you have won not by power, but by non-dependence. That knowledge makes them fear you, crave you, resent you, and attempt to reclaim you all at once. It's a reverse addiction, addicted to the one who exposed their inner emptiness. They won't admit it. They'll pretend you don't matter. They'll mock you, smear you, or showcase someone new to prove they've moved on. But behind it all is a mind that cannot escape your image. They miss the feeling of power when they controlled your emotions, the way you used to react, the admiration in your eyes, the proof that they were special. Without that, they feel unreal. You may sense this energy at times, a vague intuition, a sudden message, a hidden account watching, a strange appearance in a place you used to go. Not coincidence. It's their ego trying to reattach to the old energetic cord. But here's what matters. You're no longer pulled in. You've learned to stand inside your own space. You don't need to lock every door or run. You simply keep your peace like a small flame shielded from the wind. When they see you calm, free, and luminous without them, their greatest fear takes shape. They realize you are real, and they were only a role. That is the moment the narcissist truly collapses, not because you punished them, but because they can't bear the truth that they no longer matter. You've become a symbol of what they cannot reach, light, that needs no audience. And while they obsess, you live peacefully, freely, not as a survivor, but as someone reborn. Sign 7. When they realize you've truly disappeared from their world. When every attempt to return has failed. When their apologies no longer soften you. When their attacks no longer provoke you, when imitation only exhausts them, the narcissist finally faces what they once believed impossible. You've truly disappeared. Not disappeared from social media, not blocked or hidden, but disappeared from their inner world, the space you once completely occupied. Now, inside their psyche, everything feels empty. They still try to think of you, but the energy has changed. The familiar feeling they once fed on the thrill of control, the pleasure of seeing you react, has faded into a ghost. They try to remember, but what they recall is not you. It's the version of you they once had power over. And when they realize that version no longer exists, they know the game is over. This is the quietest, yet cruelest stage for them. No more controlling messages, no more excuses, no more scapegoats. Only themselves naked before the void you once filled. They'll try to find someone new, but everything feels flat. They'll attempt new relationships, but each one is just a failed replica of an old illusion. Because what they really crave isn't love, it's the sense of power they once felt when you were still there. And when they can't reclaim that feeling, the collapse begins from within. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For the narcissist, this is the moment when the darkness swallows them whole. They're forced to face everything they once ran from: the emptiness, the insecurity, the shattered mirror of their false self. With no one left to blame, no one left to project onto, they are left only with themselves and the truth. As for you, the one who once endured, once loved, once sacrificed, you've gone far beyond the idea of winning. You no longer need their apology, their recognition, or their understanding. Because deep down, you know, they will never understand what only a real soul can feel. You've learned the greatest lesson, that endings aren't always dramatic goodbyes. Sometimes they're quiet moments of peace, when you realize you simply feel nothing for them anymore. No hate, no love, no longing for change, just silence. And in that silence, you realize you no longer live inside their story. You've returned to being the main character of your own life. Everything they once did to make you feel small has become fuel for your freedom. You no longer need proof that they're suffering. Because when you no longer need them to hurt for you to feel at peace, that's when you've truly healed. When the narcissist realizes that you've vanished not from sight, but from their energetic system, that's when they encounter their deepest fear: invisibility. You, once their mirror, have now become the light they can never touch. You haven't just escaped them, you've transcended the entire mechanism of manipulation. You've risen above your own fear and stepped into real life, where no one holds power over your soul anymore. And that is the final sign, when you are no longer a character in their story, but the author of your own. You don't need to win, because you are free. In the end, after all the emotional storms, the power games, and the endless push and pull, you realize something profound. And true victory doesn't come from making the narcissist suffer. It comes from no longer needing them at all. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to apologize. You don't need them to prove anything. Because as long as you still need that, you're still bound to them. Liberation arrives in silence. There's no applause, no dramatic revenge, no cinematic closure. Just an ordinary morning when you wake up and realize your heart no longer feels heavy. You don't check your phone. You don't wonder where they are. You don't replay old conversations in your head. You're simply free. And that freedom doesn't come from defeating them. It comes from conquering the part of yourself that once allowed them to exist in your life. Carl Jung once said, "There is no awakening without pain." And it's true, you've walked through that pain, not to become bitter, but to become awake. You've learned to see without reacting, to love without losing yourself, to forgive without returning. You understand now that real light never needs to prove itself, it simply is. As for them, the one who once thrived on manipulating the emotions of others, they're now just a distant shadow, a side character in your awakening story. They may still perform, still speak, still search for new audiences, but you're no longer part of that stage. You've left it behind, carrying with you awareness, peace, and inner sovereignty. Your journey with the narcissist was never just about pain and betrayal. It was a sacred initiation of the soul. It forced you to face wounds, fears, and boundaries you once avoided. And in facing them, you became stronger, clearer, and more authentic than ever before. Victory isn't about making them pay. Victory is standing in your own light, calm, unbothered, needing no validation, needing no audience. Because when you can look back at it all with a gentle smile, without bitterness, without regret, that's when you've truly healed. You haven't just escaped them. You've escaped the old version of yourself, the one who confused love with control. And in that stillness, you finally understand you never had to win against anyone. You only ever had to return to yourself.